Monday,
What's the Friday?
26th.
Perfect.
Oh, 26th.
We were hoping it was actually.
Yeah. You were thinking like, oh, we moved to Monday.
Okay. Okay,
26th.
We were hoping it was actually.
Yeah. You were thinking.
all set. Yep, I think we're good to go. Awesome, great job. Okay, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Legislative Committee for the City of Salem on May 22nd, 2026. I am Julie Hoy, the mayor.
Linda Nishioka, Ward 2.
Deanna Gwynn, Ward 4.
Perfect. Okay, starting off, the federal update, Mark and Terry.
Hi, everyone. Good to see all of you. Yeah, on this Friday here in DC, it's been a very busy and eventful week in our world, especially, I mean, we work on behalf of a number of different public entities, but specifically we do a lot of work in the transportation space, and there's been a lot of transportation infrastructure stuff going on this week and really kind of just in this time frame. So I'll start actually with on the appropriations budget side, which has also been kind of a busy timeline here in DC. We have been working on the city of Salem's appropriations, congressionally directed spending or community project funding or whatever kind of acronym any different senator or house member is using on those priorities here this year. And there are two active ones. So we're live on both of our requests. Two active ones we've been working on. Andrea Salinas put in a request for the Emergency Operations Center / 911 call center for $938,000, and we feel pretty confident this is requested pretty highly by the Congresswoman. That bill, the Homeland Security bill, has not come up yet in committee, so we're not sure whether that project's being funded or not. But the committee staff, along with Congresswoman Salinas' staff, spent a lot of time together talking through the project and tweaking it and making sure that it was going to meet all kind of eligibility requirements and everything like that with FEMA ultimately. So if we were kind of last on her list, or if it was not a high priority for her, I feel pretty confident that they would not have spent this much time kind of going through the process with us. So I probably should be lowering expectations so we can exceed them, but I actually feel pretty good and confident on this one. I think we should be in pretty good shape on the House side.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Francis and I were just making faces at each other about the number. We didn't quite hear you, and can't quite pin it down. Then it was a lot of back and forth towards the end to make sure it could advance. Were you saying 978? I was remembering 1.8. I'm not sure where we are.
938.
Yes, what I got.
938. Okay.
Is this for infrastructure?
This is for a new emergency operations center that would be co-located with a new
Okay.
Willamette Valley Communications Center. So
So
it's
it's
a 911
Get more
POC,
infrastructure and.
Yeah. a
Thank
new
you.
place for them to hang out and
Which they
be
need.
perfectly connected in case of an emergency. So, yeah.
And I'll say on dollar amount, we could definitely be wrong because as you alluded to, those numbers were moving around all the time when we were
Yeah.
on different calls. So
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not a reliable witness. Moving forward, so we do know that there is a placeholder for a future EOC in the Department of Homeland Security through Salinas's office. And then the other one is,
the other one is River Road on the transportation side, which was requested by both of our U.S. senators. That request, I think, came in at 2.18 million. And the Senators Wyden and Merkley, and this is unique among Senate delegations around the country, on most of their requests, they jointly request everything. So we're on both of their request lists because their lists are basically mirrors of one another. The Senate is as is normally the case, is behind the House when it comes to moving their appropriations bills. So they've not moved any of their bills, but they are moving towards markups of the bill of many, if not all their bills during June. So once they come back from the Memorial Day recess, and I would expect THUD to be one of the first, which is, sorry, Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Appropriations Bill, to be one of the first bills that they probably bring up. And yeah, we'll have a better sense at that point of kind of where we sit on that side, on the Senate side with River Road.
Thank you.
The House has been kind of moving through their bills, just kind of in general, here on the appropriation side, this month. So they're like things are definitely happening. Things are moving along. You never know kind of at the end of the day how the process will end up and how it will wrap up, but there is movement in the House. Things are proceeding as though they would in kind of a normal year, I would say, in terms of bills moving through there. And then the other, as I alluded to at the beginning, kind of big thing that in our world, at least, that happened this week is the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee passed, I was going to say yesterday, but it was actually at like 2 a.m. This morning, passed a bipartisan surface transportation reauthorization bill, which was a $580 billion bill with $474 billion in contract authority, which is guaranteed real money that does not need to be appropriated. It passed by a vote of 62-2, so very much a bipartisan bill, which is also for me like a really good and kind of nice sign that you've got the chair and the ranking member working together and overwhelmingly passing a really big bill out of their committee. And this has funding as well as kind of laws and rules for highways, transit, motor carriers, some in rail. It doesn't do as much in rail as some of the more recent bills have done. Bike ped, other kinds of service transportation work in there. It does make some tweaks to some of the kind of discretionary grant programs that have existed in the past. And this is also just kind of the first step. So I want to dive, go two in the weeds on it, but it includes some of the programs that the city has had success with in the past, including Safe Routes to Schools, including it's a tweaked version of the Raise or Build program, which needs to, I think, by law, change names every other year. And which will now be called STAG, not to be confused with the EPA STAG program, which is totally different. But includes a bunch of those programs. Some of them have been folded into formula funding and are going away. Some different programs, including the Protect program, which the city had gone after for River Road in the past. That money has gone into formula funding, but eligibility for that would work for Protect similar projects are eligible under other programs kind of through that. So it's a big bill. We've set some details on, but I know a lot of it's rather dense, and it also like literally just happened. So that's kind of the other big thing on the federal side that's happened here in the near future, or in the near past, sorry. We've been spending a lot of time staring at the screen and staying up rather late trying to follow all this. So Terry, did you have anything to add or anything I'm missing?
May I ask you a question before you pass the mic, Mark?
Of course.
Did that middle of the night thing have anything to do with my friend Ricky?
It did. Ricky was I love that you call him that. As does my wife, also loves that you call him that. That bill, he was the ranking Democrat on there. So it was an agreement between Sam Graves and Rick Larsen was the bill that was brought to committee. And he and Sam Graves moved it through, and that them coming to an agreement and reaching a deal is what kind of led it to in order to happen. And they did it through a Big Four agreement as well. So most of the amendments that came up, it was essentially an agreement that unless both of them agreed on including it, both of them would oppose it. And so it led to both of them, both Graves and Larsen, voting down some different amendments that one of them would have liked to have done, just to kind of preserve the agreement going forward. So
that's great. I'm so proud of him. Be sure to
yeah,
tell him.
it's really impressive in this Congress to move when everyone's so divided you have a pretty big committee. I mean, there are 64 people voting, and to go 62 to 2 is in my mind like that's pretty impressive because there are some members who have some very diverse opinions on the world and on government as part of that committee, and to get all but two of them to vote against it. It was one Democrat and one Republican who voted against it, and the Democrat basically voted against it because he was upset at an amendment that passed involving Penn Station in New York City, which is in his district. And the Republican voted against it because he votes against pretty much everything. It was
Harry?
Scott Perry.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I asked for context because I think that's a good news story in the midst of a lot of stuff that's really hard and heavy, and that feels great. I am proud of him. I'm still mad about the baseball card he suckered me out of when we were kids. But thank you for that. Tell
No,
him hi.
absolutely. It was good to happen. Yeah, I think I think it's really cool when you can actually get these kind of bipartisan bills and you realize, oh, maybe government can function.
Yeah, right? Yeah, amen.
Yeah, thank you for the update.
Mayor, can I ask
Yeah.
a question, Mark? Hey, Mark and Terry, I know this is more Christine's lane, but how do you think that overall package and what comes out there, how do you think that can impact one, going into the 27 Oregon legislative session, which is 10 years removed from the 2017, the big transportation package we last saw?
Yeah.
So one, how do you think it'll impact 27? And then how does that impact our preparation this interim on what we can kind of start to plan for? What are you guys' thoughts? Are you optimistic, or do you think Christine's optimistic? And of course, I'll be sitting down with you guys to go through that, but what's your initial thoughts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it helps. I mean, this is just kind of the first step. The House has moved first in this, and the House has an easier way of moving first because most of the work that goes through all the policy stuff in the House goes through one committee, basically. There's some really minor stuff on energy and commerce and on science, but basically everything goes through transportation and infrastructure. Whereas in the Senate side, you have three committees. Environmental and Public Works has most of like the highways and the and a lot of that kind of stuff. Banking has transit. Commerce has rail as well as like motor carriers and some various other things there. So it's divided among multiple committees. It's harder to kind of wrangle them and sometimes get them to the table. So it's kind of the first step, but I think it should have a really positive step in part because the size of this bill that they agreed to was much bigger than I think what anyone was expecting. I think people were expecting significant cuts from the IIJA in terms of funding and how a lot of this kind of stuff went, but on transportation programs, the way that they ended up writing it and that it worked, there's not a single kind of recipient in terms of like a state or a transit provider or something like that who is going to receive a cut from what they had gotten before. So some people are flatline, some people are kind of going to be slight improvements on that, but it's a big bill, and I think where a lot of people thought we'd be taking a step back, given that it was a Republican Congress that is kind of pushing this really big bill out. I think most people I think it reset the kind of the floor for what we're looking at on kind of any bill going forward. So it's still, there are a number of steps that it has to go through, but I think it should be a positive in terms of what should be available at the state in terms of spending.
I just worry when I hear the national news, about blue states out west. It's like, okay, are we going to get what we need? And again, we might see a total change in, the makeup of the chambers once we get through this election in November, if it goes off as normal. We'll see, right?
Normal.
Yeah, it was, and most of the transportation funding that's in that bill, the vast majority of it gets pushed out by formula, whether it's to state DOTs, because that's a lot of the money that ODOT has to work with is federal dollars that come out of that are authorized by this bill, or they oftentimes they're required sub-allocations down to metropolitan planning organizations where it gets pushed down to MPOs, or money is also again distributed by formula to transit providers around. So I think given that there's not really a lot you can do to tweak that. I mean, those formulas are set and they're included in this bill. So that should by itself just give, kind of Oregon should get kind of what Oregon deserves in terms of the formula. It should get a good amount of money. And again, the same I would say on the transit side when it comes to that. That was kind of a question. And the administration, I think, wanted to really cut transit. And this bill has a very good, robust transit title with a good amount of money there.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Would you like to shift to the state?
Yeah, just, yeah, I would. One more thing though about federally, it just feels so good knowing that we were there talking to these folks about the call center and about River Road, and it was just very tangible, and they didn't know, and when you bring a real case for something with high need, it makes sense and people get behind it. So I just really appreciated that, guys.
No, absolutely. And I think you're being out here and advocating on his behalf. I mean, it makes a difference when elected officials come out to DC in order to talk to the members and to the staff on these projects. I think it definitely makes a difference and it moves the needle. So
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
absolutely.
Moving on to the state update.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I'll try to make up some time here. Just quick, obviously, we just got through the elections here in the primary, nothing radical happening at the state level. Our folks, yeah, no problem. We got Virginia Stapleton won her primary out in kind of the one part of our city, so we will see what happens with that. We've got a few more races to be decided. Ed Deal ran for governor, so we'll see what happens with that seat, also out a little bit on the outskirts of town. One important thing, though, Senator Solomon was taken out by a challenger, pretty much on behalf of OEA, Representative Munoz's sister, so that'll be a shift in the Senate. We'll see how that changes some dynamics. I know there's some interesting things that are going to happen within the Senate. We'll just put it like that. And we've got a long way to go before November, so we'll see what happens there. Just a couple quick meetings I've had. We've got a new legislative director in the governor's office. Bob Livingston retired, so we did that handoff about 3 weeks ago or a month ago. I can't remember. That was nice. We've got a new person in that role, a journalist. So whenever we have new folks, it's just a great opportunity for them to learn. And again, most of our job as lobbyists are really educators, right? So I see those opportunities as a blank slate, to educate somebody to the value of what we provide, not just in this community, not just the city that hosts the legislature, but what we as one of the kind of major cities within the state can offer to the legislature and obviously our community right here. So I'm looking forward to building that relationship and having that. I think what you oftentimes see with a governor going into a next term, again, there's no guarantees. We know who the candidates are now, but there's no guarantees she wins re-election. But as everybody knows, incumbents do very well. It's a pretty big math problem in Oregon statewide for Republicans. We'll see how that shakes out. But I would imagine there'll be some kind of staff shakeup at some point, and there will be a real push in the 2027 session, because once that session is over, that governor will be pretty much a lame duck. So it will really move fast. That's why I asked questions about transportation, since it'll be such a big issue. We saw the gas tax, what happened there in the election, to really get after this 2027. I'm so excited that Francis is on board, because now we can really put together a targeted strategic campaign to get the things that we need to done here in this next session. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll talk about the politics and how that shapes out here in a little bit. But that's it for that. I know we want to spend a majority of the time, Courtney, looking at our policy statements and getting ready to move forward so we can take advantage of this intro.
Yes. Yes, so today, we have an opportunity to consider some adjustments to policy statements. We can, if you wish, forward that on to council, or we can hold it and spend more time discussing it. The other piece of our work together is coming up with a list of priorities for projects that we might want to advance. Our staff team is taking a little bit more time, so we would be ready with that in June for your consideration. But for this moment, we are still toying with a couple of ideas and could benefit from your ideas and reflection. So we can do either or both, review the policy statements and the adjustments that are on offer, or discuss some of the initial thinking around project ideas. So it's really your meeting, your choice.
You have a preference? Counselor Gwynn, you have any thoughts? Counselor Nishioka?
I need a little more understanding. So you were saying that we can review policy, and that our next meeting is the 22nd.
It's the 26th.
Oh.
It was a mistake on my part. Your
Okay.
agenda says the 22nd. Mondays are always uppermost in my mind. And unfortunately, it spilled over onto the agenda, but it's June
Okay, so-
26th. that
And
this group is
so
meeting.
if you were wanting, so that's when staff would be coming back to us with their projects.
With project proposals, just high level summaries and an estimate of the cost. So there are a lot of schools of thought about how to approach project priorities. We always are thinking about the Christmas tree bill at the end, right? And looking for a good match between a project priority from the council and a legislator or a group of legislators who might also find those things to be advantageous to advance. So we're always looking at that. And then we also are mindful about trying to advance too many things can reduce our impact on any one specific thing that's very important. We understand from last session and the session before that payment in lieu of taxes, or now as we're referring to it as safe, clean and healthy saving. We understand that to be the council's primary priority. So there's a little danger in advancing that and some things, but sometimes we can find a way to do multiple projects at the same time.
So, and with your earlier ask if we wanted to review policies and then staff are gonna bring things, I'm just wondering a timeline on understanding what items we need to really sort of focus in on, and then what staff when we have time to review staff, making sure that we have everything sort of lined up before we bring it to full council. I just think that we need to be as well versed in whatever staff will be bringing to us. So if you feel that we should review policy and try to have that tucked away and ready, and then next meeting be looking at what staff will be bringing to us. I'm just trying to understand what
Yeah.
timeline you feel.
Yeah, well, so it really again is at your direction. We were ready first with policy adjustments, policy statements, and so that's what we've
Yeah,
supplied.
that's what I reviewed.
And we want to take more time with the projects to, sometimes your backup envelope becomes the pitch. And so we want to be really sure about what the pitch should be before we start asking for your support. So it's, again, if you're ready to do policy statements, we can do that. These tend to be fairly fluid.
Yes.
Sometimes, like last session, the council enacted an emergency declaration around support or concern for residents who may be experiencing immigration enforcement activities or the fear of those activities. And so we added into the policy statements some of those views after that emergency declaration passed. So to me, policy statements give us a good solid base, but they also can be fluid to respond to and reflect the emerging priorities over the course of a year. It's the projects to me that need more solid agreement before we start advancing them. So if you want to do some action today, we were prepared to support your conversation about the policy statements. But we can also defer all of it until the next meeting if you prefer. Counselor Nguyen came off mute for a moment.
I was going to say I don't have a strong opinion either way.
I would trust your direction on this, Courtney. I mean, let's move forward with what you feel you guys are ready to talk about,
Okay.
and then we can go from there. We need to postpone, we can, and put it off.
Okay.
Let's see what we can do. How much, would you rather wait? I'm kind of getting that.
I would rather take your direction and provide.
Yeah.
Any.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Thank you. I was wondering, I know that I looked at this the other night, and sometimes nighttime is not always a good time to be reviewing things. But and I'm trying to find it here now. There was some conversation, and I think this may have been about prevailing wage. And from what I recently heard Dan say is that there's been some changes that land getting ready might impact grant funding if the city's already put some in. So I'm just trying to understand what those changes are and what, because there is something in there that had the 749 and then I'm not funding it now. So do you recall where that was?
Yes, I know that there is a prevailing wage section, and I think it's usually related to economic development. It's on the first page. It's called
Okay,
Job Creation and Incentive Programs. So we also,
oh, there it is.
this is also sort of a legacy document that, I don't know, like, this is a terrible analogy, but it's gonna come out of my mouth. Like your lint screen in your dryer, it just kind of collects things. And we don't often stop and clean it out. And so as we were approaching this session, staff were looking at this a little bit more intently and
Starting to clean
noticing,
out that lint.
yes, and noticing like Mill Creek infrastructure,
Mhm.
that's kind of done.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
No offense, but so we were striking
It's
it.
resolved, maybe that's a
Right.
better word.
And I think on the job creation and incentive programs where there is a reference to prevailing wage, I think the intent of striking that value of
Okay.
750 is to make it more open to, living
Okay.
beyond, staying in the lint culture, right? Let's make it less temporal, because that represented what we knew at one point, and instead just make it more universal.
Okay,
But I see, Josh, you may be interested in, no?
Oh, I'm
You're
on
leaning
the,
forward a little.
I'm on the League of Oregon Cities Finance and Taxation Economic Development Committee, and there's a concept that'll likely move forward to try to peg that dollar amount to inflation, going back to when it was created.
Got
in
it,
the early
okay,
years, and then
okay.
inflated going forward. So I know
So
it's on the
we're-
league's radar also.
So the strike of the amount is because there is potentially some changes that may be recommended.
Don't limit it. Yeah, so, trying to be low land. So that is what you'll see there, and then, so those are just, cleanups. And then on page 3 of the
Thank you for
policy
explaining.
statements, oh, of course. On page 3 of the policy statements, you can see that we've added some language about public records.
Yes.
And that just reflects, advancing technology and knowing more than we did when we first authored that
Okay.
statement.
Okay,
And then, so no big changes is all I'm trying to articulate. And then you can see at the top of page 7, you can see, we've learned a lot about public housing management and operations over the past couple of years. And so you can see some language there that we are proposing to support our day-to-day operations. If you have any questions, Jessica's here as well.
so
Yeah.
Jessica, do you want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah.
Again, I'm sorry, I just jumped.
And
right
I made some adjustments to the language and gave it to Francis just because public housing is a term that is a federal term, a federal program that's really being pushed away. So I wanted to adjust the title to be property management and operations. So at this time, our staff are experiencing a lot of assault threats, harassing behavior. It's industry-wide, it's statewide. It's really impacting the ability to keep a healthy workforce. And so this legislative session, our hope is to find ways to relieve some of that pressure for staff, especially as it relates to their public safety and the safety of the community as a whole. And so this statement was really created so that we can have, housing authorities may have an opportunity to share a voice that we don't usually spend time in that space. As you know, our entire property management team turned over last year. And really it's the workplace.
Yeah.
And it's not for from the employer's standpoint that we're creating a bad workplace. It's the environment in which they're working. So we've had, residents be sexually harassed, or our staff and service providers be sexually harassed. So what we're trying to do, and it's not in concept yet, but is to basically work with some of our association partners and to lend our voice to a real life storytelling of what we're experiencing on the ground, because we can't afford to continue hiring security and all of that. It just doesn't work. It's not feasible. And we don't want to lose these buildings either. We're seeing a lot of landlords leave and sell their properties. And it's impacting our ability to house our rent assistance clients, right? So as an industry, as a whole, public safety is an approach we would like to take this legislative session, and we have legislative days coming up. And I'd like to be in the Capitol and advocate for a healthier workplace for our staff. And so this statement was generated so in hopes that you all would approve me speaking on behalf of our staff's voice in the Capitol in the upcoming legislative days.
Absolutely.
And then I would be happy to bring back any of the concepts that we're drafting. One of them is to support kind of a faster process to escalate when there's a harassment, assault, abuse of our staff, and be able to not have to wait 30 days before we
Is that what you have?
get it to, or more. And it takes a long
Tied up.
and then it gets tied up. And at that time, the people are still assaulting, harassing, threatening other community members. And it's become a community safety issue. And I wouldn't usually put my voice into a landlord-tenant space because we need landlords and tenants, but it actually has gotten to be an unsafe workplace in many cases. So I've brought stories if anybody's curious.
Are you gonna leave them with us or do you want to share them?
It's up to you of just kind of what people are going through. And I taught at the Oregon Affordable Housing Management Association conference on Wednesday and Thursday, and I taught navigating tricky tenants, distress tolerance and wellness, and conflict at work. And people were almost in tears in my training because we're losing our whole workforce of property management because of what's happening out there, and we need to find ways to help them. But yeah, so we're collecting stories. I want to share them in the Capitol just to give real life experience of what.
Share one here today?
Sure. Yeah.
If you want to share more than one, as far as I'm concerned, you're welcome.
I think too, we should probably make them available to the community members who are not here, and we can
Sure.
also include them in the council packet.
Yeah. Let's see. I have so many, but the first one is resident challenges crisis response. On our on-site PMCs work with residents who are dealing with substance use, traumatic brain injuries, serious mental health issues, domestic violence, and ongoing medical crises. On any given day, they may be de-escalating conflicts, responding to emergencies, coordinating with service providers, and working with law enforcement, crisis teams, and emergency responders to address threats of safety of residents and staff. They're often required to make difficult decisions that directly impact whether someone is able to remain housed or returns to being unhoused, which can have very serious consequences. One of they say conditions, the job also exposes staff to difficult and sometimes unsanitary conditions, including severe housekeeping issues, human and animal waste, blood and other biohazards, cockroach, bug infections, severe fly infestations and maggots, and situations involving neglected or abandoned animals. These conditions add another layer of stress and can be physically and emotionally draining. We go into recruitment, but here's an example from the field. Some of the realities of on-site property management are difficult to fully appreciate until you experience them firsthand. A few examples from my own experience illustrate the unpredictable and emotionally demanding nature of this work. While hurrying from one property to another for scheduled meetings, several residents stopped me with concerns, including no coffee in the community room, arches not being on site yet, and bathroom that was out of toilet paper. As I was trying to respond while still making it's my next meeting, one resident called out that his toe was falling off. He was in a wheelchair and not wearing shoes, and when I looked down, his foot was severely infected and his toe was nearly detached. I immediately had to stop everything and call 911. During an eviction hearing, a resident became so escalated that they began shouting about a school shooting and making threats. The situation was serious enough that the judge and others in the courtroom were concerned for their safety. The same resident later took their own life in the unit before the eviction was carried out. In one abandoned unit, we discovered approximately 20 cats that had been left behind, in addition, extensive damage to the unit. The home was swarmed with flies and the odor was so strong that it was noticeable before I even got out of my vehicle. Coordinating emergency care and finding placements for that many animals was chaotic and emotionally overwhelming. Myself and my coworkers returned daily to feed the cats and clean litter boxes until rescue arrangements could be made and the conditions were deeply unsettling. Over the years, many resident deaths have stayed with me, including a resident who died by self-harm by hanging outside of Inglewood West, a resident who died after falling in a concrete stairwell, and multiple situations where staff were required to enter units and encounter individuals who had passed away and were in various stages of decomposition. On multiple occasions, I have become physically ill and vomited due to severe odor. I've had to go home to change contaminated clothing and shoes, been bitten by dogs, been physically struck by clients, encountered all kinds of weapons, and came across every form of drug paraphernalia imaginable. As recently as last month during an eviction, I encountered a resident who had a rifle among their possessions. Over the years, there have been many sleepless nights caused by the stress of the work, unsettling realities that come with managing housing for some of our community's most vulnerable residents. These are the kinds of experiences that are rarely visible from the outside, but they're part of the reality of on-site property management. The work comes with very high highs and very low lows. Despite the challenging, I find it incredibly rewarding and genuinely love what I do. At the same time, I recognize that this work is not for everyone and completely understand when staff reach a point where they feel burned out and decide they can no longer continue in the work. So these are stories that I'm hearing over and over and over. People, I've given my card out, they're emailing me and sharing this with me, and I think it's time that their voice should be elevated.
Absolutely.
And I want to protect my team and I want to take their voice if I can.
It's easy for me to say this is unacceptable. And I want to help. If I can go with you.
I will encourage any form of advocacy around this so that my staff don't keep leaving. I was on the phone in tears to OHCS, our state partner, because they just keep piling on compliance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we don't even have any staff.
No, I'm so sorry.
So I want to, take this on my shoulder. I want to bring it to the Capitol and I want to elevate the voice so people feel heard.
I want to help you carry. When are ledge days?
The 15th, 16th, and 17th.
Of June?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that needs to look like for you, tell me.
Okay.
And I will be with you and offer my voice as you think it would help. It's just too important. We're asking way too much of you and staff, and that's obvious, right? I'm so sorry. So do we need to take a vote to approve Jessica moving forward with the ledge days?
No, well, ideally,
We need to
these
approve.
statements would
The
be
state.
approved, and then we staff could docket them and council would have awareness. Ideally, that's how we would approach it, but Councilor Nishioka, did you?
I did have a question. So Jessica, I totally understand something needs to be done. I'm curious as to what you think could come forward that could help. Because this is an ongoing problem with society, period. And so I'm just trying to understand what it is that you see that could be.
I'm happy to share. So we have a few thoughts in concept that we're talking about. One of them is strengthening the notice requirements in landlord tenant law. So we do have what's called a 24-hour notice to evict when there's a outrageous act on the property. So none of these rise to that level right now. So our thought is, instead of giving a notice that's a it basically says you have 14 days to remedy. You know, and then if you can do this action again in 6 months, within a 6-month period, then we can move forward and get it on the court record to even start things, right? Our thought is if we can bring that down to 10 days even, I mean, that is a huge improvement. Because it's really around the landlord tenant laws themselves, right? It's like, how can we get this to court faster so that we can bring this information to court and make a case faster so that our staff don't have to engage with folks that are harassing or intimidating or abusing them in some fashion for the next 30 days before we can even get it on the docket. So that's one thought. There are thoughts that improvements to the squatters' rights or improvements to the legislation around squatters' rights could also help, because oftentimes we find that we're engaging with people that don't even live there. They don't even belong there.
Right.
They have made their way in. And so if we can get those to court even faster as well, you know, we're still going to have to prove our cases in court. And that's fine. But if we can at least get it going, the staff will feel like they don't have to live in this never ending cycle of abuse with these individuals. They keep getting chance after chance after chance after chance. And so, there's that angle. There's also bringing awareness to a lot of just situations on the ground that people they don't know. They don't know because they don't work in that space. And telling their stories is really impactful in those places. It could also help us get funding. It could turn into some kind of funding ask with OHCS. We've been really successful with some of our permanent supportive housing mitigation funds that basically give us pots of money to pull from when we're intentionally serving a more difficult audience. And so more of that is needed to support the operations, to add security, to add more staff, to add things, because these budgets, these operational budgets that we've been working off of are just not enough to help the staff. So something's got to give. If our intention is to intentionally serve a challenging population, which we do, we want to, a more vulnerable population, the state should assist with some of those resources because they're in charge of the laws that take place.
I have a couple or two residents who have come to me and asked how can they manage their generosity of allowing people that are unhoused come into their space, whether it be in a vehicle and then they're given a key to use kitchen and bathroom, or if they're now in their backyard. And what they've experienced is the squatter is now taking ownership and threatening. And so they've come to me and asked, how can they have better laws that would help them be able to change the locks or indicate you can't stay here any longer? And would this fall into some of that?
That would be exactly what we're talking about, because it happens in apartments as well. We see a lot of our folks have guilt because they're housed.
Yes.
And then someone will come in and they will take over their apartment. It's nothing I've ever experienced before. And so our senior residents are impacted because they're more vulnerable. They'll bring people in and then they can't get them out. And so we want to help.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And so there's just one last piece that I want to draw your attention to before you decide whether to advance this on to council. The last piece is we had a great dusting off of these statements to account for changes in technology and cybersecurity and data and artificial intelligence. And so there's a series of statements there that you can see. The records one, some of these things have been collapsed or moved into related policy statements. And so it's the green text that you would be focusing on would be what would be retained should this advance.
Okay. So the drone was completely.
I think drones are already covered in a different section. Yeah, and so we just didn't duplicate, we just kept it in the original place.
Okay.
Okay, that's great.
Like me to make a motion to move forward with policies as suggested?
One question first, for Stephen Schmidt. How do you feel about the autonomous vehicle?
I'm looking forward to it. No, but it really is for us, as a city of perfect vehicles, this coming, right? So we want to make sure we have the appropriate, we don't want to be mandated to have them unless we have the ability to provide the maintenance for those and the training for our employees for these things.
We also have the city is a big beast and has many opinions about autonomous vehicles operating in the city. And, we have some, as you remember from last session, we have some challenges with some companies that want to come in and don't
Yes.
want to help support the city that they're in.
Yeah.
So those things will continue, but thanks, Jim, for adding it into dialogue. Cool.
Yes, a motion.
I move that we accept the policy adjustments as written. Is that good enough? And then,
Second.
Oh, thank you, Councilor Gwynn.
and we can vote to bring it forward once we're done with other things.
Well, that's it. I think that's enough. Oh, sorry, you should vote.
Well, yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
Thank you. We'll put this on the council meeting docket. I imagine
Okay.
I won't make friends if I put it on for Tuesday night, but certainly, certainly for the 8th is conveniently before the legislative days. So why don't
There we
we
go.
aim for June 8th?
Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you. So we've come short on time. I'll just give you a preview of some of the things that we are considering to develop into project priorities for you to consider next time. We have, we'd like to keep the Regional Emergency Operations Center on the list, just in case there are other funding opportunities that we can explore. We'd like to keep that River Road slide mitigation on your list. We have an ask for, we'd like to build up a statement requesting $600,000 in support for planning to respond to growth. There's quite a lot of planning work that the city is doing following on to our Salem. You'll hear more about that, I think, in June. Eunice, do you want to speak to this a little bit? It's got employment opportunities analysis, housing production strategy, buildable lands inventory. So just kind of support for all of that work.
Yeah, so since the last time we really took a holistic view of like our land capacity, we've grown a lot, we've seen a lot of development, and we have had a lot of requests to look at our land for employment in addition to housing, and the rules have been changing at the state level. And so we know we're going to be mandated to do this work in the future, and so we're looking for funding to kind of get started.
Good. Would that funding include additional staff? Or is it just funding for the time and?
It would largely
the
probably be
scope?
to hire on some help,
Okay,
probably on the consultant side, to help us manage the technical work.
thank you.
So we'll build that out. And then our perennial favorite is Peace Plaza.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we'd like to consider,
Can we throw in the acid ball?
that's also been a topic. So therein lies the sum total of the pitches that we would be building up. So we're gonna try to provide you with proof of concept of where we have confidence in the ask, in the total dollar ask that we might put forward, and then invite your opinions, perspectives, and priorities for those projects. The one that I didn't mention, which I mentioned earlier, which is obviously going to be our first priority, is some sort of payment in lieu of taxes. And that again will be ready for you in June in your consideration. So those are the kinds of projects so far that we're talking about
Did you say
advancing.
payment for see, let's see, it's, safe, clean, healthy. So,
Payment for services rendered.
yes, yeah, that's exactly right. Payment for services rendered, public safety services.
I was gonna call it PUP. Pony up, people.
That's good. It can go right next to, SAG. Oh, no.
She did.
Excellent.
Is that everything?
That's all the things that we were prepared to discuss today. Would you have any other things?
I don't have anything else. Deanna Gwen, do you have anything?
The only thing that I wanted to say to Jessica in regard to housing and legislation on the state level is I would just caution that we're mindful of the fact that if we evict people from our housing, we could be putting people literally on the streets because they may have a hard time for the next 10 years to find another rental property. So that would be my only concern.
It's a concern, but I mean, then we need to change things in other areas to make it possible to help people get the help that they need.
Well,
Oh, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying we have to keep in mind that there are unintended consequences with decisions that we make. That's all I'm saying.
But the way it is can't continue.
Right, but
Oh,
also to notice that harm occurs regardless
Mhm.
of the outcome, and we need help to reduce the harm that's occurring on a daily basis, but also the potential future harm to the individual who would be passed out.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that was part of what I was trying to get at with what my resolutions might there be. And I'm hoping that at the state level, we could look at increased opportunities for mental health problems or, because again, as Councillor Gwynn indicated, it's trying to resolve one problem, but it's creating another issue that also needs to be resolved. So I would hope that as you speak, that, we also indicate that funding needs to be directed to support these individuals.
At the root of the problem.
It's a delicate balance that housing authorities play. We don't offer our voice without understanding the weight that our voice
Yeah,
carries.
sure.
Thank you.
This is.
I concur.
Thank you, Deanna.
All right, if there is nothing else from anyone in the room, we are adjourned.